The morning routine at Murphy's Café had remained unchanged for 3 years. Sarah Collins, 26 and weather beyond her years, would arrive before sunrise, flip the open sign, and prepare for another day of serving coffee and dreams deferred. The small diner sat wedged between a tire shop and a coin laundry in a forgotten part of town, where hope seemed as faded as the paint on the building's exterior. Sarah lived in the studio apartment above the cafe, an arrangement that blurred the lines between home and work until they disappeared entirely. Her life had been carved into manageable pieces after her parents died in a car accident when she was 19, leaving her with nothing but debt and the necessity to survive. The regulars knew her story in fragments, enough to offer sympathy, not enough to truly understand the weight she carried. It was on a crisp Wednesday in September that the child first appeared. He looked to be about 9 years old, though his careful, measured movements suggested someone much older. His clothes were clean but worn, the kind that had been washed so many times the fabric had surrendered its original texture. He carried a school backpack that seemed too heavy for his small frame and chose the corner table farthest from the entrance, where he could observe the entire restaurant while keeping his back to the wall. The first morning, he ordered only hot chocolate. Sarah brought it with a gentle smile, noting how his thin fingers wrapped around a mug, as if drawing warmth from more than just a drink. He thanked her with a politeness that seemed rehearsed, then opened a paperback book and read with the intense concentration of someone escaping into another world. The pattern repeated daily. The boy, she began thinking of him as her morning reader, would arrive at exactly 7:30 a.m., order hot chocolate, and sit with his book until 8:15, when he would pack up and leave for school. He never ordered food, despite the enticing aromas of bacon and fresh pancakes that filled the cafe each morning. By the second week, Sarah's motherly instincts began stirring. She noticed how the boy's eyes would follow the plates of food she carried to other tables, the way he would swallow hard when someone ordered chocolate chip pancakes. His hunger was quiet, but unmistakable to someone who had experienced it herself. On the 10th day, Sarah made what appeared to be an innocent mistake. "Oh, goodness," she said, setting down a plate of scrambled eggs and toast beside his hot chocolate. "I'm so sorry. The kitchen accidentally made an extra breakfast. I hate to see food go to waste." The boy looked up with suspicion and longing warring in his dark eyes. "It happens sometimes," Sarah continued casually, already turning away. "Health department rules mean we can't save it for later. Shame to throw it out." When she returned 15 minutes later, the plate was empty, licked clean with a thoroughness that broke her heart. The boy met her eyes briefly as she cleared the table. "Thank you," he whispered, the words carrying more weight than seemed possible from someone so young. Thus began their unspoken agreement. Each morning, Sarah would discover that the kitchen had accidentally prepared an extra meal, sometimes French toast, sometimes a cheese omelet, occasionally a bowl of oatmeal with fresh fruit when the weather turned cold. The boy never asked for anything, never presumed, but he ate every crumb with gratitude that made Sarah's throat tight with emotion. "You're feeding that stray kid again," observed Dolores, the cook, after watching Sarah prepare yet another accidental breakfast. Dolores had worked in restaurants for 30 years and possessed a hardened pragmatism that came from witnessing countless sob stories. "They'll take advantage, you know. Give them an inch. They'll take a mile." "Maybe," Sarah replied, carefully arranging the eggs on the plate. "But I'd rather be taken advantage of than let a child go hungry." "Your funeral," Dolores muttered, but Sarah caught her adding an extra strip of bacon to the plate when she thought no one was looking. Frank Morrison, the cafe's owner, eventually noticed a pattern during one of his weekly visits. A shrewd businessman in his 60s, Frank had built a small chain of diners by watching every penny and trusting no one completely. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said one morning, gesturing toward the office behind the kitchen. Sarah's stomach dropped as she followed him, certain her secret charity was about to end her employment. "I've been watching you with that boy," Frank began, settling behind his cluttered desk. "Giving away free meals isn't sustainable. This is a business, not a food bank." "I know," Sarah said quickly. "I can pay for the meals myself. Take it out of my tips." Frank studied her with the calculating gaze of a man who had hired and fired hundreds of employees. "Your tips barely cover your rent upstairs." You'd bankrupt yourself feeding every hungry kid who walks through that door. Just this one kid, Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. And just breakfast. I can manage it. Something in her tone, perhaps the quiet determination or the echo of his own childhood memories of hunger, made Frank pause. After a long moment, he sighed and leaned back in his chair. Fine, but it comes out of your pay, and if it affects your work or causes problems with other customers, it stops immediately. Understood? Relief flooded through Sarah. Understood. Each morning thereafter, she set aside money from her modest earnings to cover the boys' breakfast. It meant skipping her own lunch sometimes, meant postponing the car repairs she desperately needed, but watching the child eat with quiet gratitude made every sacrifice worthwhile. The arrangement continued through October and into November. Sarah began to notice subtle changes in the boy. His shoulders relaxed slightly. He made eye contact more frequently, and occasionally she caught the ghost of a smile when she brought his accidental breakfast. She still didn't know his name, his story, or why he seemed to be navigating the world alone, but she respected his privacy while providing the one thing she could: sustenance without judgment. Then came the morning he didn't appear. Sarah found herself checking the door repeatedly, her anxiety growing with each passing minute. She prepared his usual breakfast anyway: scrambled eggs with cheese, wheat toast, and orange juice, setting it at his empty table just in case. The untouched plate became a monument to worry as the morning progressed. One day became 2, then a week. Sarah continued preparing the meal each morning, hope dwindling but not quite extinguished. The other waitresses began making jokes about her invisible customer, and even kind-hearted Dolores suggested it was time to accept that the boy had moved on. "They're like cats," said Betty, another long-time employee. "They come and go. Don't take it personal." But Sarah did take it personally. In caring for the child, she had discovered a purpose beyond mere survival. His absence left a hollow ache that surprised her with its intensity. The mockery escalated when a customer photographed the empty table with its waiting breakfast and posted it online with the caption, "Local diner serves meals to invisible children. Charity scam or mental breakdown?" The post gained traction, drawing cruel comments about Sarah's mental state and the cafe's supposed publicity stunt. Humiliated and questioning her actions the first time, Sarah considered abandoning the ritual. Perhaps everyone was right. Perhaps she was foolish to care so deeply for a child who had vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared. But on a cold Tuesday morning in early December, everything changed. Sarah arrived at work to find the parking lot filled with black SUVs bearing government plates. Her first thought was immigration raid. Her second was health inspection, but neither explained the military personnel standing at attention beside the vehicles. Inside the cafe, 3 soldiers in dress uniforms waited with the bearing of men accustomed to being obeyed. The eldest, a colonel whose chest displayed rows of ribbons and medals, stepped forward as Sarah entered. "Are you Sarah Collins?" he asked, his voice carrying the authority of command. "Yes," Sarah replied, her voice barely steady. "Is something wrong?" "Ma'am, my name is Colonel Martinez, and I'm here because of a promise I made to one of my soldiers." He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a sealed envelope. "This concerns a young boy named Timothy Rodriguez." Sarah's breath caught. Timothy. After all these weeks, she finally had a name. Timothy's father was Staff Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez. Colonel Martinez continued, "One of the finest soldiers I've ever had the honor to command. He was killed in action 3 weeks ago in Afghanistan." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. The empty table, the untouched breakfast, the child's sudden disappearance. It all made terrible sense now. "What you may not know," the colonel said gently, "is that Timothy had been living alone for months. His mother abandoned the family shortly after his father deployed, leaving him to fend for himself. He was too proud, too scared of the system, to ask for help." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth as she realized the magnitude of what the child had been enduring. Alone, hungry, maintaining the pretense of normalcy while his world crumbled around him. In his final letter home, "Sergeant Rodriguez wrote about you," Colonel Martinez said, offering her the envelope. Timothy had mentioned in his own letters that a kind waitress brought him breakfast each morning. His father wanted us to find you if anything happened to him. With trembling fingers, Sarah opened the envelope and extracted a handwritten note on military letterhead. To the woman who feeds my son, I don't know your name, but Timothy writes about you in every letter. He tells me about the accidental breakfast and how you never make him feel ashamed for being hungry. You have no idea what this means to a father fighting far from home. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. Please know that your kindness toward my boy gave me peace in my final days. You didn't just feed a hungry child. You preserved the dignity of a soldier's son. Thank you for being the light in his darkness when I couldn't be there. Staff Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez, United States Army. Tears blurred Sarah's vision as she read the letter twice, 3 times, trying to process the weight of gratitude from a man she had never met, but who had entrusted her with his most precious treasure. Where's Timothy now? She managed to ask. Safe, Colonel Martinez assured her. He's with his grandparents in New Mexico. It took time to locate them and arrange custody, which is why he disappeared so suddenly. The colonel straightened to his full height and executed a perfect military salute. On behalf of the United States Army and the memory of Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, thank you for your service to our family. Behind him, the other soldiers followed suit, their synchronized salute a gesture of profound respect rarely accorded to civilians. In that moment, Sarah understood that her simple act of kindness had rippled far beyond her small café, touching the heart of a grieving father and honoring the sacrifice of those who serve. The story spread through town like wildfire, transforming Sarah from an object of ridicule into a local hero. The same social media platforms that had mocked her now shared the soldier's letter, generating thousands of supportive comments and donations to help other military families in need. Frank Morrison, moved by the revelation, established a permanent policy. Active military and their families eat free, no questions asked. He had the letter framed and hung behind the register, alongside a photo of Staff Sergeant Rodriguez in his dress uniform. But perhaps the most meaningful response came 2 weeks later in the form of a crayon-drawn picture mailed from New Mexico. It showed a woman with kind eyes serving breakfast to a small boy, with "Thank you, Miss Sarah," written in careful letters at the bottom. Timothy had included a note in his improving handwriting. Dear Miss Sarah, Grandma and Grandpa are teaching me to cook, so maybe someday I can make breakfast for someone who needs it too. I hope you know that every morning you help me. You were helping my daddy too, because he worried about me every day. Love, Timothy. Sarah kept the drawing in her apron pocket, a reminder that kindness needs no justification beyond the simple recognition of another's need. She never learned whether Timothy understood the full magnitude of his father's sacrifice or the depths of his own courage in surviving those months alone. But she hoped he would grow up knowing that even in the darkest times, unexpected angels appear bearing scrambled eggs and unconditional compassion. The empty corner table was never empty again. Word spread through military networks, and soldiers passing through town made pilgrimages to Murphy's Café, not for food, but for the reminder that heroism sometimes wears an apron instead of uniform. Sarah served them all with the same quiet dignity she had shown Timothy, understanding now that every meal shared was an act of rebellion against a world that too often overlooks the hungry among us. Years later, when people asked Sarah about that morning when the soldiers came, she would smile and say simply, I learned that feeding someone isn't about the food. It's about seeing them as human when the world makes them feel invisible. The cafe still operates today, with Timothy's picture prominently displayed and Frank's policy firmly in place. Sarah eventually married a veteran who understood her calling, and together they expanded the program to help military families throughout the state. But every morning at 7:30, she still glances toward that corner table, remembering a quiet boy with careful eyes who taught her that the smallest acts of kindness can echo across continents and through generations. In a world obsessed with grand gestures and viral fame, Sarah Collins proved that heroism is often found in the simple decision to place a plate before someone who's hungry and ask no questions beyond. Would you like more orange juice? Sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin not with speeches or manifestos, but with scrambled eggs served with dignity to a child who desperately needed to know that someone, somewhere, still cared enough to notice his empty stomach and full heart. The lesson remains as relevant today as it was that September morning when Timothy first walked to the cafe doors. We may not be able to solve every problem or heal every wound, but we can ensure that today, this moment, one person is not hungry. And in a broken world, that alone can be enough to restore faith in human goodness. Sarah still wears her apron to work each morning, still prepares breakfast for anyone who needs it, still believes that feeding people is a form of prayer that requires no church or congregation. She learned from a 9-year-old boy and his soldier father that love is often spelled B-R-A-K-F-A-S-T, served without conditions and seasoned with the radical notion that everyone deserves to be fed, both in body and in spirit. The story continues to ripple outward, inspiring other cafe owners, other waitresses, other ordinary people to perform extraordinary acts of daily kindness. Because sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with warm plates and gentle smiles, proving that the meek shall indeed inherit the earth, one breakfast at a time.